Regarding Men, Episode 4, State of the Union.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I am Paul Elam with avoiceformen.com, and I am with two incomparable friends. That would be Tom Golden of MenAreGood.com and Janice Fiamengo, who needs no introduction, but you can find her most often at the Studio Brûlée YouTube channel, giving us all kinds of very incisive commentary on events in the world, especially those related to gender politics. Today on Regarding Men, we are going to be discussing the State of the Union address, which happened on February 5th. That was a Tuesday. We sorted all that out before we started this discussion because nobody could remember when it was. But it was on February 5th, a Tuesday. And it was the third longest State of the Union address in history. And it was complicated and a many-faceted speech where there's going to be probably quite a bit to discuss about in this discussion. And I'm going to throw in a few ideas from the beginning, but they're by no means they're going to be the only thing I had to say on this. I think it'll take a couple of rounds to get it all out. One, congratulations to President Trump for overall an excellent State of the Union address, in my opinion. And I know that will upset some people. I really don't care, but we'll move on from that. One of the things, before we get into the gender aspect of this, that I want to point out is, and it's something that I'm very happy about, is that we have had a sort of unadvertised war ideologically in the United States for some time, having to do with globalists versus non-globalists. And I want to point out that for the first time, a president is pushing back against his own intelligence community and his own party in order to try to get us out of these embroiled foreign conflicts that we're in, where our young men and women are dying.
Amen.
And it is a very difficult and dangerous thing to do, to go up against those establishments. And you have to consider that, the connections that the Defense Department has to places like Northrop Grumman and Boeing and other super defense contractors, the money that's played into this, and why you saw Mattis quit. These people are all connected. Mattis was a highly paid individual from the military-industrial complex. Most of these other people are, and Donald Trump is pushing back against them and trying to get us out of something as insane as a 17, 19-year-old war, however long we've been in Afghanistan, I forget, with no end in sight. And we are now witnessing the American establishment, the American political establishment, do everything they can to make sure that we stay there.
Yeah.
And that we stay there indefinitely, spending money and lives. And I got to give President Trump credit for pushing back against that.
Amen.
And with that, I'm going to pass the buck, and I have more to say on the gender aspect of this, but that is, to me, in the end, a men's issue. It's men overwhelmingly that die with their blood in the sand overseas, and getting them out of there saves men's lives. So I'm all for it.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. That's just a critical piece of the speech, but also, it shows his courage. The guy is courageous to pull that or try and pull it off. But, when I looked at the speech, the thing that I kept resonating with is that it was a men are good speech. It resonated with the sense that it didn't say it, but men are good, which is such contrast to the toxic masculinity crap. It's just, and there were certainly some things that he said that were not the best in the world. But in general, he talked about men in terms of being wonderful beings, making sacrifices, their bravery, the things that they've done that has helped us along as a country. So, that's my first comment, is that, hey, look, this sounded like a men are good speech. I liked it. I liked that part of it anyway.
Yeah.
How about you, Janice?
Yeah, I agree. There were lots of things that were good in the speech. If I had to be super critical, I would say that what it shows us is that we now face the choice between a feminist, gynocentric kind of orientation to the United States of America, or a non-feminist but still gynocentric orientation towards the United States. And so what we were seeing from Donald Trump, who is, has been accused, as we know, of all sorts, hating women, of being a terrible misogynist, of being part of a war on women, and all of these kinds of things. But what we saw, in fact, is that here we have an alpha male who certainly does celebrate male achievement, but is still undoubtedly a gynocentrist. So
Yes.
the parts I liked about the speech were the celebration of the role of men, both in America's past. He started off by paying tribute to those men who were involved in D-Day, and he recognized the terrible sacrifice. He talked about the very young men not knowing if they were even going to come back alive. So it wasn't, simply kind of an idealizing. It was a recognition of how terrifying that was for them. But still, there they were. He celebrated the moon landing, the astronauts. He also celebrated contemporary heroes, the ICE agent who wants to devote his life to rescuing people from human trafficking, and particularly from sex trafficking. The SWAT team guy, Matson, I think his name was, who rescued people at the Tree of Life Synagogue from the gunman, taking 7 bullets in his body and having, I forget how many surgeries. It was an extraordinary number, 11 surgeries or something, and yet he was still there. So I like that. But at the same time, this is a speech that it was overwhelmingly concerned about women's issues and problems to and ignored the ordinary heroes amongst our male population. They were often invisible in really disturbing ways. Obviously, as men's advocates, there are a bunch of things we would probably have liked to have seen in a speech, and we never will see, at least not in the foreseeable future. Any discussion of men's health issues, any discussion of the skyrocketing rates of male suicide. He talked at one point very briefly about measures that he has enacted to address injustices to the African American community in, I think it was prison sentencing guidelines. It was just one line, I think. Yeah. And that was great. But as we all know, there is that race gap in prison sentencing, but we know that there's a much larger gender gap, and it's hard to imagine any president ever singling that out as an achievement, that would be in any way addressed. So there are lots of reasons to feel pleased that it's not Hillary Clinton giving that address, I think, because I can't even imagine her celebrating specifically male heroes. That wouldn't really be a part of, she'd be talking about how women are the primary victims of war. At least Donald Trump is aware that men are the primary victims of war, and he wants to keep our men safe. But still, from a men's rights perspective, there were lots of things to be sorry about and concerned about too.
Yeah, the other thing I noticed,
I think, was the fact that I know it's been, I think, 6 or 7 years was the tipping point to where the United States became a predominantly female workforce. There's, I don't know, predominant's the right word, but there were more women employed than men in the United States for the first time, starting about 6 years ago. And President Trump, unfortunately, lauded the fact that 58% of the new jobs that have been created since he was in office have gone to women. Mm-hmm. And of course, that was one of the few times that the women in white in the audience, which was school children, clapped enthusiastically for themselves, mind you, not for country, not even necessarily for their party, but yay me. Mm-hmm. Which explains in part, unfortunately, I mean, again, some of these things are difficult to approach, but they're important to talk about. What we saw in the audience of the of the Union address explains exactly why Donald Trump needs to be gynocentric in the way he addresses the audience.
Yes.
Because what you see in the United States and in many other countries, I'm sure, is much more of a monolith of the female vote than you see with men. That if women decide collectively that they don't like you, which is, one of Donald Trump's vulnerable points, is brash nature, and some of the things that he said and done has upset women collectively, rather than, just some individual women. That is part of the problem, and he feeds right into it. I mean, I've got to say that is one of my thumbs down.
Yeah.
For the talk was his gushing about the accomplishment of women, especially in light of what Janice was talking about the alarming male suicide rate. And I can assure you that those 70,000 a year overdoses from opiates going on in the United States are overwhelmingly male deaths. And of course, when we talk about those deaths, they're just deaths of people, of addicts, not of men. So long way to go, but I think it reflects that the society has a long way to go. And I can imagine that Donald Trump might be one of the few people who would actually address these issues honestly if it wouldn't cost him the next election.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you that, I think Janice's perception of its being a gynocentric culture without feminism is a good one. I think that's about right. But I have a feeling that Trump is starting to crack a little bit because, his comment after the Kavanaugh hearing where he said, our young men are vulnerable to false accusations. They're living in a dangerous world. It's like if he can realize that, he's got potential to see that your average man is really in danger these days, and that's not a gynocentric message at all.
Right.
So I have a sense that he may be coming around more than people give him credit for. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good point, that it's not necessarily a problem of Donald Trump himself. It's a strategic
Yes.
matter that, that he simply cannot come out and say. And we are particularly concerned about the men who are dying of these drug overdoses because he knows that the reaction to that is going to be, how can you be more concerned about men than about women?
That's right. That's right.
And it, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
There were some little indications that were given from this. And one of the things that I noticed was that a lot of those guys that he brought up were white males. This is a huge shift.
Yeah, that's a sin in and of itself.
Exactly, Paul. It was must have been risky in some ways. But he picked people like Buzz Aldrin. I mean, who's going to complain about that? But he picked these men that were, obviously unassailable in some ways, but they were white. And we haven't seen that for a while, and glorifying them. Glorifying white men? Oh my gosh. I thought white men were the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, so at least he's shifting from the toxic masculinity discourse to what I think we should all call the tonic masculinity discourse, which is the discourse that recognizes how much men do to make our societies livable and even wonderful, of course. And these men are tonic in that they help us. They inject health into our societies. They make things better. And I think he's good at that.
Hashtag tonic masculinity. I'll be using it.
I like that. I like it.
I like it too.
Yeah, I've been trying to promote it on Twitter, but I'm not very good. Yeah, I have. I thought at one point that every couple of days I'd try to find a story. I mean, it's not hard to find them, of a man doing something wonderful, just an ordinary guy jumping into the ocean to save somebody who's drowning or whatever it happens to be, and have it as hashtag tonic masculinity.
Nice.
Also, and then we should also have intoxicating masculinity. That's a little more risque.
I'm familiar with that, but I just don't want to brag.
Yeah, you could play your electric guitar, and that would be intoxicating. Yeah.
Well, and to Trump's credit, we also have, there was this statement about our sons being in peril from false accusations, which
Yeah,
floored
that's
me.
amazing.
Absolutely floored me when I saw that an American president had brought up that subject in that way.
Yes.
He also appointed Betsy DeVos to do something about the peril that young men are on our college campuses, which hopefully will make the efforts of people like Chris Pecos a little easier in pursuing these Title IX complaints on behalf of men as a class. But Donald Trump really has done more, I think, than any other president that I know about when it comes to countering the traditional gynocentrism that's so prevalent on the conservative side of politics. And that has been the duality, that men get it either from feminism or they get chivalry on the other side.
Right.
Either way, it's slavery and abuse and devaluing. And I'm not one of those ones that's willing to buy that chivalry's any better than being service to feminists. It's all about, sacrifice in service to something other than yourself. And hopefully one day we can start teaching boys of their own value.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that I really did appreciate in the speech and in what it says about Trump's priorities as president was when he talked about his concern to bring back manufacturing jobs. Like, he's aware. I mean, there's a lot of statistics in there about male employment and the future for young men that are really significant and that weren't spoken of in specifically gender terms. But obviously, the fact that he's concerned about manufacturing jobs in particular. I think he said that there were 600,000 new manufacturing jobs alone created in the last year or since he took office. I can't remember which. So that's a really good sign. I mean, a booming economy is, and reducing unemployment. Those are things that are going to benefit men. One of the things that I was reading about recently that's quite concerning is that there is a record number of men between the ages of 25 and 55 who are not even looking for work anymore. And that's quite an extraordinary shock to, socially and psychologically to American society, to have men in that bracket who won't even be in the, as far as I understand it, won't even figure in the unemployment ranks because they're not even looking for jobs at all. So now this study may have used as its data a sample from before Trump's presidency, started to have these good effects. So maybe things aren't quite that bad now. But I certainly hope that, and I do trust that he will continue to push manufacturing and other types of jobs that particularly benefit men. But I was just so sickened really by the image of those women in white celebrating the 58% of women who have benefited, because like as you said, as both of you said, the impacts on men of the fact that they are lagging behind in the workforce are so significant, in every way, that for what it means for family stability, for what it means for children and the possibility that they're going to be raised in homes and not have a father, for male psychological and emotional well-being.
Suicide rate.
Yeah, suicide rate, health, everything. It's so incredibly worrisome. And to think that's if the future is female, as all of these women like to say, and if we're going to have more and more women in Congress passing laws that not only primarily benefit women, but that show an utter disregard, an utter incapacity to feel any empathy for men at all, it is a really scary prospect. I don't want women in politics if that's what women in politics looks like. I don't want a female president if the entire speech is going to be focused on women's issues and female achievements. Startling, the revelation of not only selfishness, but utter inability to care for men.
Yes.
I'd vote for Nikki Haley.
Yeah. There are some women who do not fall into that
Betsy
category.
DeVos. But that crew of dressed in white was very difficult to watch. I mean, the word narcissism kept coming into my mind. It's like, oh, the only thing they get excited about is us. Yay! High five. Did you notice that Cortez missed the high five?
I heard about that.
An air five.
Among many other things.
Yes, exactly, Paul. But gosh,
but I do have to say in Cortez's defense that I respect and admire her willingness to take a stand on cow farts. That is true bravery.
I'll tell you what, that's a lot to be said for that. Who else would have the courage to say something like that?
To say that we're going to eliminate all cows. Will there be a band of cow murderers who will go around destroying them all under her regime? Yeah.
Well, and I had honestly had fears of crazy bioterrorists deciding they're going to go kill cows to make some sort of statement about the environment.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't be.
I mean, not to mention
burglars.
the amount of employment that the beef industry represents, and the amount of the economy that all this stuff. I mean, we could do a whole other discussion on the insanity of the New Green Deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we should. Yeah, that would be
Janice, those guys you were talking about that are not looking for work, maybe they're just practicing the unwilling to work part.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's it. Well, the Democrats will pay them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're practicing.
Yeah.
They're getting better at it.
The bad news is it's with your money, but that's another talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think that this State of the Union did change some minds. I've gotten a couple of emails from people who have said, I didn't like Trump before, but I kind of like him now. So minds are starting to shift. I saw today his popularity rating went up to 52%. In the Rasmussen poll.
Me. And the polls, it was really funny. Every once in a while, I switch to places like MSNBC and CNN to laugh on the news. And they had to report that the public approved of the State of the Union address by 76%. And it was funny watching them grit their teeth and announce those results.
Yes.
And then try to make excuses like, well, the people that really hate Trump weren't watching. So they only polled people who watched it.
That's probably true.
It may be even more important, the breakdown of those numbers, because if you look at the Republicans, it was 90% liked the speech. And if you look at Democrats, it was 30% that liked the speech. But if you looked at the independents, it was like 80 or 85%. So it's like, wait a minute. The independents are shifting. They're moving back towards what he's saying. I mean, the Democrats are not going to like it. You saw the people in white sneer like that. But the people who are kind of on the fence, who are thinking, well, maybe, maybe not, they're starting to listen, because I think they liked this positive message. It was a positive message. And he was brilliant, I think, to say, do you want to choose greatness or gridlock?
Mm-hmm.
And he set the whole thing up so that if you're on the side of greatness, you're going to be working with us. If you want to stop us up, then you're focusing on gridlock. Mm-hmm. And I think that was brilliant. I think
which they obviously are.
Yes, and we'll be seeing more and more of that idea of greatness to gridlock as time goes on. But I think the American people really like the positive message, the message that America is exceptional, and that you as Americans are exceptional. Now let's work on this. Mm-hmm. He was calling people together, Anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. It's a very powerful and compelling part of the message, and the fact that it resonated so strongly with the independents is a good thing.
Yes.
And I think that the demonstration, especially by the women in white, of their extreme partisanship, and just their downright nastiness, their unwillingness to applaud. I mean, the camera wasn't always on them, but when he was announcing the unemployment figures, even the fact that people with disabilities are I can't think how to say it exactly how he said it, but that their numbers amongst the unemployed have also significantly declined. Imagine not applauding for that. I mean, maybe you don't want to jump to your feet and go crazy over it, but imagine not applauding that people with disabilities are less represented amongst the unemployment rolls.
They wouldn't even applaud for stopping child trafficking.
No, well, they did in the end, but only after they had checked it out with one another.
That's right. They had the sisterhood had to get together and decide whether or not it was appropriate to applaud.
That's what to me seems so obvious, is that this group has almost zero critical thinking skills. They're not thinking for themselves. They're thinking like the herd.
Donald Trump is bad.
These are supposed to be our leaders. And they're watching someone to know when to stand up and when to sit down. Shut up. That's crazy. That's
the one
insane.
I think I see the most out there is that Donald Trump is a moron, which I don't know how you apply that to the billionaire that won the presidency above all odds against both parties, but hey, color me different.
Indeed.
Indeed. And some of the issues that he's now targeting, particularly the one about late-term abortions. It's quite striking. To have him talk about people erupting in cheers over New York's passing of legislation that allows a baby to be aborted, even when it's actually in the process of being born, which is unimaginable. Virginia declaring that a baby can even be killed after it's been born. I mean, we know Obama voted for legislation that would deny doctors to have to resuscitate a child that had survived a botched abortion. So, at some level that does play to significant portion of American voters, I guess. But to see those, especially the women in white, sitting there refusing even to acknowledge, not even to have an expression on their face while he gave that speech about children's right to life, is quite striking and a really useful image of what elite feminist women's priorities look like.
Puppets. Puppets.
It's groupthink all the way, folks. There's no doubt about it.
It's crazy.
And it's sad.
It is sad. Those are supposed to be our leaders.
So now we got the House of Representatives in being controlled.
Yes.
By people who can't think for themselves. I mean, this is staggering.
It's true. It's frightening.
It's governing the most powerful nation on earth by people who can't think. That scares me every time I think about it.
I know.
But anyway, speaking of people who can't think, we have some awards to
Hot diggity dog.
So who wants to, Janice, you want to give away our recognition to the person who gets humanitarian tip of the hat?
We give we had a discussion about this before. We couldn't quite decide, but we've decided we're going to give our humanitarian tip of the hat to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing her name, because of her vivid demonstration of the short-sightedness, nastiness, and herd mind of politicians like her.
She's
I think we owe her recognition for that. There's she has reinvigorated the use of the word bimbo. And we really have to give her credit for that. The other thing is that she has, and again, folks, I understand there is men in the men's movement who come from the left political spectrum. I understand and respect that. And as a matter of fact, I think it's important to make a distinction in the difference between liberals and leftists. Leftists aren't liberals. They're crazy little wannabe dictators. I know what a liberal is, and I have no problem with them at all. I may disagree on a lot of things, but I don't have a problem with them. But,
Yeah.
you know, if you're going to come into the comments and complain about this, I just want you to understand from my part that I'm not taking shots at liberals here. But I am saying that Cortez has done us all a favor by showing us just how insane the left has become.
Yes.
It's embarrassing, or it should be. To anybody with any self-awareness would be highly embarrassed to even show their face in public after the kind of thing she advocates. So we give her that because her presence increases the chances that people will opt for sanity in the elections. And I really believe that.
Well said. Very good.
Yeah.
And so congratulations, AOC. We love you.
So
I give you a Nancy Pelosi clap.
Yeah, right.
we both did that. Who gets the PUTA, Paul?
Who gets the PUTA? The PUTA goes to
There she comes. There she comes.
Nancy Pelosi. There it goes. There it goes. The PUTA goes to Nancy Pelosi. She's has several accomplishments that are worthy of this. Lying about the Secret Service not being able to keep the first State of the Union address safe gives her a flying PUTA. I think the crooked way she holds her mouth when she's sitting there thinking and picking up the menu or whatever it is, the Chipotle's menu she was reading during the State of the Union.
That was amazing. I've never seen that before.
Tweeting, staggering, and tweeting. We're sitting right behind the President of the United States.
You got a PUTA for that, baby. Tweet.
But in here, I can take the word a little more literally because Nancy Pelosi has been one of the biggest whores in Washington, D.C. for her political agenda.
Yeah.
She's always complimented about being a great fundraiser for her side. She twists arms to do it. She threatens to do it. Don't kid yourself about the idea that women in politics will bring a new sense of morality to the game. Power is power, doesn't matter, and power gets wielded. Nancy Pelosi is living proof that meet the new boss, same as the old boss. So go. I'm happy to see her take the flying PUTA home.
Indeed. Well said.
Yes.
Well pooted. So are we finished?
I think we are.
I think so.
That's good. It's been fun, guys.
Very good. Very interesting.
Fun. Good to be with you guys. Very interesting ideas. And it's good to share them with you all and to be shared with. So we'll see you guys next week.
Okay.
Adioso.
Odegas.
Okay.
We'll see you. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't want to do that. Turn the fucking thing off first, Golden.
Come on, Golden. Turn the fucking thing off.